today our guest is, as I've said before, Dr. Lasse Becker, an alumni of the University of Göttingen. Mr. Becker, what have been the major challenges of this crisis on Europe, and are there any opportunities for Europe you see in this crisis? Thank you very much, and you have the word.
Thank you. Well, there are many challenges which I'm personally seeing, and I think which we all have faced. Perhaps that summarizes a little bit one of the challenges we are seeing currently. A cartoon from the Standard in Austria, where the European community has to be acting together, but on the other way, we see social distancing also in completely unseen topics like the closing of frontiers, of borders between Europe, and also on social distancing the people and also the leadership in Europe, which sometimes creates additional challenges. As you have said, there are also opportunities, and I want to discuss that a little bit, but perhaps to give you an introduction why I'm sitting here. First of all, from a personal background, I'm originally from Hesse, but now, especially at the moment, working in Bavaria, half of my time and the other half in the northern part of Hesse. As mentioned, I'm an alumnus of the University of Göttingen, had the honor of receiving once in the past the prize of the Stiftungsrat from Professor Kaspar Hehne for the SME network of the Göttingen Graduate School of Social Sciences, where I've been for 3 years a coordinator, which was a great pleasure and an honor, actually linking the local smaller companies to the University of Göttingen and its graduates. I have, on the other hand, and that is perhaps a little bit at least I believe that might be the reason why Alumni Göttingen asked me, I have several backgrounds which might be interesting for the European perspective. On the one hand, I've been heavily involved during my PhD and already before that in politics on the German level, being Bundesvorsitzender of a political youth organization and member of the board of the National Party there. And I continue to be active now, not having that much time anymore for that, only on those things I'm focusing on. And one thing is the Council of the European Liberal Party of the ALDE, the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. And there I'm still one of the council members on the European level. And I have been for different seminars all around the world, speaker in topics of democracy building, which also is somehow a topic we are seeing right now in Europe, not only pandemic related, but with the rise of populism, which makes some European perspective, from my point of view, more important. On the other hand, after finishing my PhD in Göttingen, I decided not to focus in the direction of politics, but go into something I might have never thought about before, about the tool industry. Tools which you would buy in a DIY shop, in a Baumarkt, or use in a professional steel mill. And there I'm now, after 5 years, the vice president of our biggest product segment for Osborne, a daughter company of a US company in Europe. And I'm responsible for the biggest product segment in Europe and Asia, and also general manager of our plant here in Wunsiedel and the related GmbH. Before that, I was in operations, working in project management and operational excellence. And I think both the roles in operations and sales, as well as the different perspective there, not being an engineer, but also the role of looking on the political side of the pandemic now from the outside in the economy, but knowing how politics work. And on the other hand, looking sometimes also at the economic perspective and the company perspective with the eyes of somebody who is politically involved in decision making is something which I believe makes it from a perspective view different than if you just have the one set of eyes which you often hear in public discussions in Germany. So starting with the current outlook or the current situation, I want to start with a starting point in European politics, and later on we'll come to the business perspective there. We had the starting point that we face many different health systems in Europe, and we all are aware of that. So I don't have to dig deeper into details how some of the countries manage COVID-19 completely different than others. But the important thing is, for instance, in Greece, you have the situation that you have, after the economic crisis, which hit Greece earlier, as such a low number of intensive care beds that Greece at that point in time had to say, we have to find a solution, not getting anywhere close to a critical situation in the pandemic. While on the other hand, you had in Germany a situation where even during the peak time of COVID-19, we were not like in France or in Italy in the unfortunate political situation that the doctors were only able to do a triage, so deciding who has the best chances to survive. And that was the situation we were facing in other European countries. So we also see there a huge variety of political reactions. We had countries like the UK, which were first very relaxed, and somehow after Boris Johnson was personally hit by it, that changed, and afterwards UK became much stricter than before. On the other hand, we have countries like Spain and France and Germany, frankly speaking, who were choosing a mixed approach, who were very strict on some issues but very open on other issues. And that is the reason why I put there behind Germany, we were feeling strict, but I can tell you we weren't. I'm responsible for plans in 7 different nations, and I can tell you, except for Sweden, the plans which were the smoothest and easiest to operate during the pandemic were those in Germany. Sweden was even more relaxed, I have to say that, but and Romania was most of the time similar. But whether it was Portugal, whether it was Spain, whether it was our sales entities in the UK, or even further plans like in India, we were facing very different approaches by the different countries. And I can tell you now from a personal background, my older brother is living in Greece. And I can tell you that was strict. There you were not allowed at a point in time to leave the home without texting the government. So you had to send a text message and then you would get a receipt that you were allowed to leave the house to go for a walk or to go shopping. So there we can say we had a huge variety of different reactions within Europe. I would say from a political standpoint, we can see that the restrictions in the different countries have created different environments how to politically start something. I have worked with my PhD on economics of innovation and especially the question of federalism within Europe. And I found it interesting from that scientific point of view that you could even call that a little bit like a testing field or a laboratory for different approaches, because Greece had to be more strict because of the first point that they did not have the intensive care beds, where other countries who were in a similar situation, which weren't that strict, were facing challenges afterwards. And I'm not talking about Italy. Italy was hit first, so basically they had, from my perspective, the bad luck of not being ready for that. But you can, for instance, compare Spain and Greece, and the measures in Greece were very soon to a different level of strictness, in there, although the situation in Spain was also not handled very lightly, but you had differences in there. And that is something where you can see some countries have worked other solutions than others. If you take a look at the map, that is actually the number of cumulative cases in from the Johns Hopkins University. And what I found interesting when looking at it is that in Scandinavia, while we all talk in Germany, especially about the Swedish way, actually Norway and Finland, and to a certain extent also Denmark, who have a combination of the cultural approach being a Scandinavian country, which means some bigger distances, get more used to colder temperatures and those challenges. But on the other hand, not the very open system Sweden was running. Actually, those have the lowest rates in Europe from if you take a look at the curves of the pandemic. And that is an interesting point to have for the starting point in the back of your mind. When I take a look at the consequences on the European political level, there are challenges which come on the political side out of COVID-19, and one is clearly the domination of Germany. And being a German, that is something which we have to acknowledge. In May, there were the figures in the newspapers that 50%, or actually 51%, of the overall spend in pandemic countermeasures, so the economic rescue stimulus, were spent in Germany, of the overall European spend. Of course, that creates topics in the competitiveness of other markets. That increases the challenges for other countries. And that is something we have to have in the back of our mind. On the right, you can see the graph from SURE, a now introduced program of the European Commission, which is similar to what we in Germany call Kurzarbeit, short working time. And you see 87 billion euros is what SURE costs on the European level. I can tell you the prolongation of the German Kurzarbeit, which was just announced by the German government, is 10 billion. So not that far off if you see that meant over here is for entire Europe. And that is something where we still face significant challenges because the starting points also from an economic point of view are very, very different there. And the question, what is really the right way and the right approach from the economic point of view on the political side is a challenge. Because you can ask the question, should we rescue really everybody? Perhaps we have those voting tools in here, or mention it in the chat. Who of you have recently booked either a flight or a hotel or a vacation, not online, but via a Reisebüro, via a travel agency? It would be nice. I would be surprised if that would be a significant number of the participants, but perhaps somebody. I can't see the chat if I'm presenting, but I think you can see that. Is there a reaction? How many are there?
At the moment, we don't have reactions on that, but maybe.
I can tell you. I have had my wedding 1.5 years ago, and I received a voucher for a travel agency at that wedding, and it is still sitting at home in my desk, and that is not only COVID related. Yes, I might have used it otherwise earlier, but I have to say, nonetheless, it is more comfortable to book a flight online. So you can ask the question, is the business model not anyway going to change for travel agency? And then the question is, can we afford to rescue every business model which is currently in question? And that is a challenge which I see perhaps more from my perspective as a liberal there, but nonetheless, that is something which we have to have in the back of our mind. What I also see as a European, that I see a huge risk of greater inequality within between the European nations currently through the pandemic, because countries like Germany, the UK, or France, which are the economic powerhouses, the Benelux countries, can afford to rescue. But on the other hand, we have other countries who can't that easily afford all the rescue measures, like the Mediterranean countries. And there we then have the situation that you simply cannot say, we will do everything what we can in Germany. Like the prolongation of Kurzarbeit is something from the economic perspective in a company in Germany. I say, yes, it is good for the companies in Germany. But on the other hand, being a European who is politically interested, I have to say, but it creates problems elsewhere. And that is something which we also have to admit. And that is, if I take a look at the company perspective within Europe, we see that not all countries can afford the same. In Germany, we have now the even expanded short working time. In Romania, I can tell you, we received from 1 month to the other the information, okay, if you want to shut down your plant due to low order volumes, you now have 14 more days. Afterwards, it won't be possible because the Romanian government didn't have the money. In Slovenia, there we don't have a plant, but I actually heard that from a competitor who was very jealous on the German Kurzarbeit system, because basically Slovenia ended the pandemic in end of May. The pandemic officially was ended by government decree, where everybody was saying, why is Slovenia doing that? You're still having cases. And when I talked with the colleagues over there, the feedback was, yes, you know, the Slovenian government could not afford paying the governmental support measures any longer. And as long as it was claimed as a pandemic, they would have to pay that. And that is something where you can quite easily see how everything is linked there. And we see very different impacts on the economic side. I can tell you, we're in the tool industry behind. I'm still sitting in the office. Behind, you can see some of our products behind me, but we are going into very different markets, and therefore I can also give you some topics from some different key markets we are having. Everybody knows automotive, and the classical industry was hit heavily. That is what everybody knows. We also have to say some things in Germany, and you might have heard that the construction industry is still very stable running currently. But there we have the situation that if you talk to somebody in the construction industry, the people are telling you, if there's another lockdown, we are 100% certain that we will not have any chance to go through this without a severe downturn also here. On the other hand, on the entire European level, we are also delivering to DIY markets. We are booming there. So you have areas where you are at 50% or even below what your normal revenues are, and you have other markets where you are in some weeks above 200% from prior year. And that is a little bit the challenge everybody is facing right now. And if I'm not talking about health industry, I have friends working in the health sector. They are partially, whether it's health or grocery stores, they are having in some months the best months of the year. And that is something where you have to say, okay, we see very different pictures. But what is common is that the uncertainty, and that is what the graph on the right is showing, that the uncertainty went through the roof. And on the other hand, the economic downturn was heavily hitting at the same time. Because nobody knew and nobody knows now what is happening next year. I have to do at work, of course, a plan for 2021. But it is a challenge saying anything longer than Q1 or Q2. If we have the recovery and everything is booming again, the entire world might be different than if we are getting hit by a second or third wave of the pandemic without having any vaccine or medicine. And we all don't know that currently. And we are facing challenges which also show the European perspective of that crisis. I'm here sitting currently in Wunsiedel. You might not know where that is. That is close to the Czech border. And 1/4 of our workforce here is coming from the Czech Republic. We had in March the situation that from one day to the other, we received the information. Actually, it was a Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. We received the information from Thursday on, nobody is allowed to cross the Czech border. So from between 2 days, we were missing 25% of the workforce. And actually that creates something. At that point in time, the order intake was going down, so we could compensate that. But the uncertainty was not only an uncertainty for me as a manager of the company, but also for the people. The Czech colleagues at that moment were all afraid that we would fire them at that point in time. They had fear that they would lose their job because they could not come to work. And legally, that would also have been possible, even under strict German laws, that would have been possible. But we said, well, we want you to come back. So we decided to go for short working time, for Kurzarbeit. But that creates challenges which you have not seen anywhere in the last 20 to 30 years. And I can give you the background. My co-general manager is slightly older than 60, and he told me in his entire business life he had never experienced so much uncertainty and drastic immediate decisions to be taken like now. And that is also creating impacts in stability of companies. You have to answer questions which you have not answered before. What does it mean for a company if home office is now the standard for everybody working from home? That reduces the personal exchanges, but it also creates frictions, which I can't solve as a manager. To give you an example, I'm asked by our people working in the plant, isn't it unfair that we have to come here, but the colleagues in the administration and sales and finance can work from home? And I have to tell them, it is not unfair because we can't let you produce the product at home. You don't have the machine park over there. That is not working. And those are completely new challenges which you are facing. And what we also have to say, the comparative advantage can now also increase the inequalities. Because of course now a German company using Kurzarbeit has a far bigger likelihood of surviving even longer in a crisis mode than a company in a country which cannot afford that. And that is something where the political topic on the one side and the economic topic are closely linked together and bring together a situation. So that is generally a short outlook on what I'm seeing in the current situation. Now I would switch over to an outlook what the opportunity is and what we have to focus on the European level. And of course, that is not only positive, but I think the opportunity of reshaping Europe is there. And that is something where we have to say, also the crisis has shown us core values of Europe. Some might not be aware of that, but we have a common cultural background compared to other regions in the world. If I take a look how the situation is handled in the United States or in South America, or even in part of Southeast Asia or Australia, we have very different approaches. Because here we were even discussing when shutting the borders, how can we open them up again? In Australia or New Zealand, currently nobody is discussing whether they should reopen the borders. They are still in that very close regional focus there. And the different mentalities we are seeing in Europe also generates opportunities. I would say that Sweden, even though being very open there during the pandemic, is still not heavily hit like many, like some other countries, but I would say mid-size hit compared to others, is something which has to do something with the different cultural mentalities we see in Europe, which we can use as our stronghold in there, and which we have to use. And what I see as somebody politically active, there is a clear focus on good politics by many politicians out of different parties in Europe currently. And it's less partisanship, less what does that pay for my own party, but more what does it pay for the entire country? What is it good for? And that is something which I think is the very positive opportunity we are seeing, because that reduces currently the impact of populism. But there are still challenges. The health system is not stable all over Europe. And even in those areas like Germany, where we have a stable health system, we have to be aware that that is not automatically the case, but we still have to be careful. As I mentioned before, the imbalances between the European countries might grow, and we have to tackle that. And something, although I say the governments, at least in Germany and many other European countries, have handled the pandemic very well. And I've talked about my political background. There is generally the situation that, especially in Germany, somebody who is involved in politics does not say that often about different parties. But I have to say, I'm feeling generally well managed by the German federal government, although it is from different parties, and also by most of the state governments running through all party lines in Germany. And that is something where I would say that is positive, but politics and politicians will do mistakes. And so will we do in business. But we have to accept that in a pandemic, because it's a situation where nobody has seen a similar situation before, and we then have to simply adjust and correct them quickly. And the challenge with the topic, what comes after the pandemic, is nobody knows. And I see the risk that if we are not handling the economic crisis, which might follow after the health crisis, or might actually have already started in some countries, that might even create a re-rise of populists, which we are now fighting and successfully fighting in order to have that remaining that way. I think it is important that we have to move together towards a common European goal. And as I'm already, I think, 5 minutes longer than I was told before, I want to finish with the vision. I would say is that we use this pandemic, although it has severe challenges for all of us, to strengthen Europe and the European Union by fighting populism, but also by taking a look and taking a step back, not only at our own perspective, or the German national perspective, or any other country's national perspective, but at the overall European picture. And that is something why I gladly agreed to talk here today, and also to discuss with you, because I think the challenges might be a different point of view from my company background, but I think the challenges are something which I believe is something we have to solve all together. So, thank you.